She thought she had married a ruthless gangster, but when she saw where he truly came from, she couldn't believe her eyes. And when her cruel relatives came crawling back, that's when things got even more shocking. Anita's life had been filled with hardship. Forced into marriage with a man feared by many, she thought she was doomed. But nothing could have prepared her for the truth about her husband. When she stepped into his world, everything changed. But just as she started to embrace her new life, the people who once mistreated her came knocking, begging. Would she forgive them? Or would karma finally do its job? Before we dive into today's gripping story, we want to take a moment to appreciate you, our amazing subscribers, new viewers, and the incredible community that makes Moonlight Tales by Samzy so special. Your likes, shares, and thoughtful comments mean the world to us, and we're beyond grateful for your support. If this is your first time here, welcome. You're in for a ride filled with drama, suspense, and unexpected twists. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest stories. And of course, drop a comment below. We love hearing from you, and your support keeps us going. Now, sit back, relax, and let's dive right back into the story, because things are about to get even more intense. As Anita stepped through the grand entrance of the mansion, her breath caught in her throat. The soft glow of the chandelier overhead bathed the foyer in golden light, casting delicate reflections on the polished marble floor. Everything about the place felt unreal, almost like a dream she wasn't meant to be in. She hesitated, her feet barely moving as she took it all in: the elegant spiral staircase, the tall glass windows, the towering bookshelves filled with books she knew she'd never have the courage to touch. Her heart pounded as her fingers brushed against the smooth surface of a wooden pillar, just to convince herself that this wasn't some elaborate illusion. The air inside smelled fresh, like lavender and vanilla, a sharp contrast to the dusty, cramped apartment she had left behind. A part of her wanted to believe this was a mistake, that the guards would suddenly realize they had the wrong people and throw them out. But the way everyone welcomed Ben told her otherwise. Ben. Anita turned to look at him, watching as he moved through the house with an ease that left her stunned. It was the same Ben, the man who lived in a half-finished house, who had carried himself like a brute, who barely spoke of his past. And yet, here he was, standing in the center of all this luxury like he belonged. Because he did belong. Her fingers clenched the fabric of her dress as the realization hit her fully. Ben wasn't just some reckless gangster. He wasn't some man scraping to survive, fighting his way through life like she had always thought. No, he was someone else entirely. Someone who had left behind a world of comfort, a world of wealth so vast that she couldn't even begin to understand it. A lump formed in her throat. Why had he chosen to live that other life instead? Why had he hidden all of this from her? Was their marriage just another decision he had made on a whim, something he had done simply because he could? She felt small, insignificant. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Miss, shall I take your coat?" Anita blinked in surprise. A woman dressed in a crisp black uniform stood before her, smiling politely. It took Anita a moment to realize that she was being addressed. Never in her life had anyone spoken to her with such quiet respect. She hurriedly shrugged off her coat, mumbling a quick thank you as the woman took it and disappeared down the hallway. Anita turned to Ben, her mind buzzing with questions. He was already looking at her, a knowing expression on his face. He had seen her doubt. He had seen her hesitation. Before she could say anything, a warm voice echoed through the hall. "Ben?" Anita turned just in time to see a young woman standing a few feet away, her magazine slipping from her hands. The resemblance between her and Ben was undeniable. Ben took a step forward, his arms open. "Ivy," he said softly. The woman, his sister, stared at him, frozen. Anita watched as shock melted into emotion, as Ivy's eyes glistened and her lips quivered. Then, without warning, Ben closed the distance and wrapped his arms around her. Ivy let out a choked sob and buried her face in his shoulder. Anita's chest tightened at the sight. She had never seen Ben like this before. So open. So vulnerable. A wave of warmth spread through the room as Ivy clung to him, whispering, "I thought you were never coming back." Ben let out a low chuckle. "It's been a long time, my dear." Anita lowered her gaze, suddenly feeling like an outsider. This was a family she had never known, a world she had never been a part of. The scent of fresh roses filled her nose, making her lift her head slightly. The flowers lined the hallway in elegant vases, their petals soft and vibrant. She had never seen so many beautiful things in one place before. The paintings on the walls, the plush furniture, the delicate gold accents, it was overwhelming. She swallowed. What did this mean for her? Would she ever truly belong here? A sudden burst of laughter pulled her from her thoughts. She turned to see Ben's mother approaching, her face filled with pure joy. The woman barely stopped to look at Ben before she threw her arms around him, squeezing him so tightly that even Ben, as strong as he was, stumbled back slightly. My son has come home," she cried, her voice thick with emotion. Anita watched as Ben's father approached, his steps slower but his eyes warm with pride. They all stood there, wrapped in an embrace of love and relief. And then, as if remembering something important, Ben turned to Anita. His mother followed his gaze, and for the first time, their eyes met. Anita felt small again. But then, the woman's face softened, and without hesitation, she pulled Anita into a tight, unexpected hug. "You must be Anita," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "Oh, my dear, welcome home." Anita stiffened. "Home?" Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. She didn't know what to say, how to react. No one had ever welcomed her home before. And for the first time in a long, long time, she didn't know whether to feel scared or safe. Ben had not always been the rough, reckless man people knew him to be. Once, he was just a boy, young, carefree, and full of dreams. Growing up in wealth, he had everything a child could ask for. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, were known not just for their fortune but for their strong values and influence in the city. They raised their children with love, ensuring they had the best of everything. But wealth did not mean happiness. As a child, Ben was full of life, but he always felt overshadowed. His father, a man of great power and discipline, had high expectations. He wanted his son to be strong, responsible, and prepared to take over the family empire. But Ben was different. He was adventurous, always seeking excitement beyond the polished gates of their estate. He longed for freedom, for a life beyond rules and expectations. At first, his father was patient. He tried to guide Ben, to mold him into the perfect heir. But Ben's spirit could not be tamed. He despised the stiff suits, the business meetings, the endless lessons about power and control. He did not want to follow in his father's footsteps. He wanted to live life on his own terms. Then came the incident that changed everything. Ben was 17 when he got involved with the wrong crowd. He had always been fascinated by the streets, the rawness, the danger, the thrill of the unknown. It started with small things, sneaking out at night, skipping lessons, making friends with people his parents warned him about. But soon, it escalated. One night, in an attempt to prove himself, he joined a group of street racers in a dangerous competition. The race was illegal, wild, and filled with people who thrived on recklessness. Ben, eager to taste freedom, pushed himself beyond limits. But the night ended in disaster. His car crashed into a storefront, causing damage worth millions. The scandal was all over the news the next morning. The son of the powerful Mr. Thompson, caught in an illegal race, had brought shame to the family name. His father was furious. The argument that followed was the worst they had ever had. "You were given everything, Ben. Everything. And this is what you do," his father's voice had thundered through the mansion. Ben, bruised and shaken from the accident, had barely been able to stand under his father's furious gaze. "I never wanted any of it," he spat back. "I'm not like you. I don't want to live in your perfect world." His father's next words would haunt him forever. "Then leave. If you refuse to be a Thompson, then stop disgracing my name." Ben had expected his father to calm down, to take his words back, but he never did. His mother tried to reason with him, but her voice was drowned in the weight of his father's disappointment. And so, Ben left. With nothing but the clothes on his back, he walked out of the grand mansion, leaving behind his wealth, his family, and the life he had known. He had no plan, no direction, just an anger burning in his chest and a desire to prove that he could survive without his family's fortune. Life outside was nothing like he had imagined. He had thought freedom would taste sweet, but instead, it was bitter, harsh, and cruel. He had no money, no home, no one to turn to. The streets did not welcome him. Hunger became his companion, and survival became his only goal. It was then that he found himself drawn to the underworld, the same kind of people he had once admired from afar. Gangs, street gamblers, outlaws. They lived by their own rules, answering to no one. In them, he saw a reflection of himself. And so, he became one of them. He started small, delivering packages, running errands, learning the ways of the streets. He toughened up quickly, fighting for survival, earning his place among men who had nothing to lose. In time, he gained respect, power, and a reputation. They called him ruthless, fearless, a man who never backed down. But deep inside, Ben was lost. He had proven his father wrong, he had survived. But at what cost? He had traded one kind of prison for another. The money he made was never enough to fill the emptiness. He had walked away from his family's wealth, only to end up in an unfinished house, living a life of struggle and violence. Yet, he never returned home. Pride kept him away. Even when he had nothing, even when the nights were cold and his stomach was empty, he refused to crawl back. He would rather fight, rather endure, than admit defeat. Years passed, and Ben became a man hardened by life. He no longer spoke of the past, no longer dreamed of the warm halls of the mansion he once called home. To the world, he was just another reckless man, a gangster who knew nothing but chaos. But deep down, buried beneath years of anger and regret, was still the boy who had once longed for freedom. The boy who had walked away, not knowing that one day, fate would bring him back to the very home he had left behind. From the moment Anita stepped into the grand mansion, Ivy had watched her closely. At first, it wasn't out of admiration, but curiosity. She had heard stories about her brother's rough life, how he lived recklessly, feared by many, and was never expected to settle down. Yet, here was Anita, his wife. A quiet, gentle woman with a distant sadness in her eyes. Ivy couldn't help but wonder, how did she manage to stay with Ben? What had she seen in him that made her choose to remain by his side? At first, their conversations were brief and polite. Ivy would ask if Anita needed anything, and Anita, always feeling like a guest, would shake her head with a small smile. But as the days passed, small moments began to weave them together. One afternoon, Ivy walked into the kitchen and found Anita there. The cooks had prepared a variety of dishes, but Anita stood near the counter, staring at the fresh vegetables in front of her. Ivy raised an eyebrow. "You cook?" she asked. Anita hesitated before nodding. "I used to, back at my uncle's house." There was something in her voice, a hint of old pain, that Ivy noticed. She didn't ask more. Instead, she pulled out a stool and sat beside her. "Teach me," Ivy said suddenly. Anita looked at her, surprised. "You want to learn?" Ivy shrugged. "Why not? I've never really needed to, but I think it'd be fun." That day, for the first time, they cooked together. Anita showed Ivy how to prepare a simple but delicious dish, explaining little tricks she had learned from trial and error over the years. Ivy listened carefully, making playful mistakes that made Anita laugh, a soft, genuine laugh Ivy hadn't heard before. By the time they were done, the kitchen smelled wonderful, and Ivy, with a proud grin, declared that she had officially made her first edible meal. Later that evening, they sat outside on the balcony, a cool breeze sweeping through the garden. Ivy, in her usual chatty way, told Anita stories about her childhood, how Ben had always been a troublemaker, but a protective brother nonetheless. She spoke about how empty the house felt when he left, how she had wondered if she would ever see him again. "I won't lie, I was angry at him for leaving us," Ivy admitted, pulling her legs up onto the chair. "I missed him, but I also hated that he never looked back. It was like we didn't exist to him anymore." Anita listened quietly, understanding the hurt behind Ivy's words. I think Ben had his own battles to fight, she said softly. Maybe he didn't know how to come back. Ivy sighed. Maybe. But I'm glad he's here now. And I'm glad you're here too. Anita turned to her, slightly startled by the sincerity in her voice. Ivy smiled. I mean it. You're different. I thought you'd be cold and distant, like most people who marry into wealthy families, but you're not. You remind me of someone I wish I had growing up. Anita didn't know what to say to that. She had never been someone's wish before. As days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. Ivy would drag Anita into her room just to pick out clothes for her, insisting that Anita try on new outfits. You're beautiful, you just don't show it enough, she'd say as she twirled Anita in front of the mirror. Sometimes, they would spend hours talking about things that had nothing to do with Ben, books, music, dreams they once had but never pursued. Ivy, who had grown up surrounded by wealth, was fascinated by Anita's resilience, and Anita, in turn, admired Ivy's warmth and confidence. One evening, Ivy walked into Anita's room to find her staring at an old, tattered bracelet in her hand. Anita quickly wiped her eyes and set it aside, but Ivy had already seen the tears. Was it yours? Ivy asked gently, sitting beside her. Anita shook her head. It was my mother's. It's the only thing I have left of her. Ivy didn't press for details. Instead, she took Anita's hand and squeezed it. You don't have to hold onto the past alone, you know. You have me now. Anita looked at her, truly looked at her, and in that moment, she felt something shift. This wasn't just her husband's sister. This was Ivy, her friend, her sister in a way she had never experienced before. That night, Anita fell asleep with a peaceful heart, knowing that for the first time in a long time, she had someone who truly cared for her, not out of duty, but out of love. Mr. James' family's desperation. The house felt colder than usual, not because of the weather, but because of the heaviness in the air. The scent of damp walls and unwashed clothes lingered, a reminder of how far they had fallen. The wooden chairs in their small, crumbling home creaked under Mr. James as he sat, his head buried in his hands. Bills lay scattered on the table, unpaid rent, overdue electricity, school fees that had long been ignored. The weight of it all pressed down on him like a mountain. Mrs. Jane paced the room, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Her once plump face had thinned out from stress, her lips twisted in frustration. I can't do this anymore, James, she muttered. We can't keep borrowing money. We can't keep living like this. Sophie sat on the tattered couch, arms crossed, a deep frown on her face. If we don't do something soon, we'll be out on the streets, she said bitterly. Kevin, the youngest, sat in a corner, his stomach growling. He had long stopped complaining about hunger. What was the point? Complaints never put food on the table. Mr. James lifted his head slowly, his eyes dull with exhaustion. What do you want me to do, Jane? His voice was hoarse, defeated. I've tried everything. No one is willing to help. The loan sharks are after me. I can't sleep at night knowing they might show up any time. A heavy silence filled the room. The truth was harsh, but they couldn't escape it. They had hit rock bottom. Then, Mrs. Jane spoke, her voice sharp with desperation. Anita. Sophie scoffed. And what about her? She married that gangster, Mrs. Jane continued. But we've heard things, Sophie. They say he's not who we thought he was. They say he's from a wealthy family, that he's back home, with her. Mr. James sat up straighter, a spark of something, hope, flickering in his tired eyes. If that's true, then we need to find her, Mrs. Jane said firmly. If Anita really has wealth now, she owes us. Kevin finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. She doesn't owe us anything. Mrs. Jane shot him a glare. She lived under our roof, didn't she? Kevin lowered his gaze, knowing there was no use arguing. That night, Mr. James couldn't sleep. His mind raced with thoughts. He remembered Anita as a child, quiet, obedient, always trying to stay out of trouble. He remembered how they had treated her, how they had forced her into that marriage just to rid themselves of responsibility. But now, she was their only hope. At dawn, they packed what little they had. The journey was long, exhausting. The bus ride was cramped, hot, and uncomfortable, but no one complained. They couldn't afford to. Hunger gnawed at them, but they pressed on, each mile bringing them closer to Anita. As they neared their destination, emotions swirled within them: shame, hope, fear. What if Anita refused to help them? What if she turned them away the way they had once turned their backs on her? Mrs. Jane refused to consider that possibility. She won't, she told herself. She can't. When they finally arrived at the city, their jaws dropped at the sight of the wealthy neighborhood. It was like stepping into another world, a world of luxury they had only seen in magazines. The streets were clean, the houses massive, the air filled with the scent of flowers and wealth. Then, they saw it, the mansion. Their feet felt heavy as they walked toward the towering iron gate. Mr. James swallowed hard, his palms sweaty. Mrs. Jane's confidence wavered as she took in the grandeur before her. Sophie shifted uncomfortably, suddenly feeling small. Kevin remained silent. With a deep breath, Mr. James knocked. The guards appeared, their faces unreadable. "Who are you?" Mr. James cleared his throat. We're here to see Anita." The guards studied them, unimpressed. "And who might you be?" Mr. James hesitated, shame creeping into his voice. "Her family." The guards exchanged a look. And then, one of them stepped forward. "You should leave." The confrontation at the mansion gate. The journey had been long and exhausting, but nothing could have prepared Mr. James and his family for the sight before them. The mansion stood tall and proud, its grand structure radiating elegance and wealth. The golden fountain in the driveway shimmered under the bright afternoon sun, the water cascading down its intricate design. Lush green lawns stretched endlessly, neatly trimmed and lined with vibrant flowers that gave off a fresh, sweet scent. For a moment, no one spoke. They simply stood there, staring in stunned silence. Mrs. Jane shifted uncomfortably, adjusting her worn-out shawl as she stole a glance at her husband. "Are you sure this is the place?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. James nodded, though even he struggled to believe it. He had imagined something grand, yes, but this was beyond anything he had pictured. "This is it," he muttered. "This is where Anita lives now." Sophie, standing beside her mother, folded her arms tightly across her chest. Her pride had taken a brutal hit the moment she laid eyes on the mansion. The very cousin she had looked down on, the one she had mocked, ridiculed, and dismissed as worthless, was now living in a world she could only dream of. A mixture of jealousy and disbelief twisted inside her, but she said nothing. Kevin, the youngest, kicked a small stone near his feet. His stomach ached with hunger, and his legs felt weak from the long journey. He had no energy to care about pride or appearances. Right now, all he wanted was food, shelter, and warmth. Taking a deep breath, Mr. James stepped forward and knocked firmly on the heavy iron gate. The sound echoed through the quiet avenue. The family waited, their hearts pounding in nervous anticipation. Moments later, two security guards emerged from a small booth near the entrance. They were tall, broad-shouldered men, dressed in crisp uniforms that made them appear even more intimidating. Their eyes swept over the tired, poorly dressed visitors, their expressions unreadable. "Who's there?" one of them asked, his voice firm. Mr. James cleared his throat, forcing a polite smile. "Good afternoon, sir. We are here to see Anita. She is my niece. Please, let her know we're here." The guards exchanged glances before the second one spoke. "Anita?" He raised an eyebrow. "Master Ben's wife?" Mrs. Jane stepped forward eagerly, nodding quickly. Yes, that's her. She's my husband's late brother's daughter. We are her family." She let out a nervous chuckle, as if saying it aloud would make their claim stronger. The first guard's sharp gaze studied them carefully. His eyes trailed over their tired faces, their worn-out clothes, the desperation hidden behind their forced smiles. He had seen this before, people from the past crawling back the moment they smelled wealth. You say you're her family, the guard said slowly. Then why haven't we heard of you before? The question hit hard. Mr. James opened his mouth, but found himself at a loss for words. Mrs. Jane fidgeted with the hem of her dress, her face growing hot. Sophie scoffed. What do you mean? We're her blood. Does family need an invitation to visit? The second guard let out a dry chuckle. That depends. If you were really her family, wouldn't she have mentioned you? Silence. Mrs. Jane's nostrils flared. How dare you speak to us like that, she snapped. Do you know who we are? The first guard crossed his arms. That's exactly the problem, madam. We don't know who you are. And unless Master Ben or his wife says otherwise, we're not letting anyone in. Kevin tugged at his father's sleeve. Papa, let's just go, he mumbled. They won't let us in. Mr. James clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. The humiliation burned deep, but more than that, fear gripped his heart. They had nowhere else to go. If Anita turned them away, they would truly be lost. He took a shaky step closer. Please, he said, his voice raw. We have traveled a long way. We are not here to cause trouble. Just let Anita know we're here. If she doesn't want to see us, we'll leave. But please, at least let her decide. The first guard sighed, his hardened gaze softening slightly. He glanced at his partner, who gave a small nod. Wait here, he said before turning toward the mansion. As the large gate remained firmly shut before them, Mr. James and his family stood still, anxiety clawing at their chests. Would Anita hear them out? Or would she finally make them taste the bitterness of rejection, the very same bitterness they had once forced upon her? Anita stood by the large window of the mansion, staring out at the driveway where her uncle, aunt, Sophie, and Kevin sat on the pavement, looking tired and defeated. The sight of them stirred something deep inside her, memories of the pain, the hunger, the cruel words, and the endless days of suffering under their roof. She should have felt satisfied seeing them like this, begging at the gates of the very wealth they once mocked her for not having. But instead, she felt conflicted. Ben stood behind her, arms crossed, watching her carefully. He hadn't said much since the guards informed them about the unexpected visitors. You don't have to see them, he finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. After everything they did to you, you owe them nothing. Anita turned to face him. I know, she whispered. But I need to hear what they have to say. Ben's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fine. But you're not going out there alone. Minutes later, the grand doors of the mansion slowly opened, and Anita stepped out, flanked by Ben and Ivy. The guards stood close by, watching in case things turned ugly. As soon as Mr. James saw her, he scrambled to his feet, his eyes filled with something she had never seen before, genuine desperation. Anita, he breathed, stepping forward, but the guards moved to block him. He stopped, swallowing hard before speaking again. My daughter, please, we need your help. Daughter? The word sent a sharp pang through Anita's chest. He had never called her that before. Never, not even once. She folded her arms, tilting her head slightly. Help, she echoed, her tone unreadable. Mrs. Jane wiped her sweaty face with the edge of her tattered scarf. Yes, Anita, we made mistakes. We know that now. But things have been so hard for us. Her voice broke, and for the first time, Anita noticed how thin and weary she looked. Your uncle lost his job. The debts, the hunger, we can't go on like this. Sophie, who once took pride in humiliating Anita, looked down at her feet, unable to meet her cousin's gaze. Kevin, the youngest, looked even worse. His once arrogant demeanor had been replaced with silent shame. Anita took a deep breath, her heart pounding. These were the same people who had made her life unbearable, who had laughed when she cried, who had treated her as less than human. And now, they stood before her, broken and pleading. She could feel Ben's eyes on her, waiting for her decision. Ivy shifted beside her, silently offering support. Did you ever think of this moment? Anita finally asked, her voice soft but sharp. Did you ever imagine a day when you would stand before me, asking for help? Mr. James lowered his head. No, but we are here now, Anita. Please. A part of her wanted to turn her back on them, to let them feel the pain of rejection the way she had felt it countless times. But another part, the part of her that had always longed for family, for kindness, for closure, that part couldn't ignore them completely. She sighed, shaking her head. I'm not the same helpless girl you threw away, she said, her voice steady. I don't owe you anything.